All
right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting on February 21st, 2023. I'd like to welcome everybody here. I'd also like to just make some acknowledgments of our classified and SLEA and SLCSD representatives. Representing SLEA, we have President James Tobler and Mike Harmon here with us. From SLCSD, virtually, we have Dr. Adriana Pinto. Of course, classified is B. Alonzo, who's representing, and then office professionals is Whitney Favre. We'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And the first thing on our agenda, we do not have a need for a closed session, so we're going to jump right to the Pledge of Allegiance. And James Tobler, president of SLEA, is going to lead us in that tonight. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, James, for leading us in that. Up next, we have some recognitions of nationally board certified teachers. I'd like to invite Dr. Tiffany Hall up. And board members, we have 5 schools represented. And so when you hear your school represented, I don't know if the teachers are here tonight to accept these, but maybe just give a wave and that you're here with them.
Thank you. I've invited Desi Olson up here with me. The National Board Certification Program was established in 1987, and it is one of the few teacher recognition programs that are recognized by every state in the union. So a teacher who is a national board certified teacher is recognized throughout the state in that. The thing that I'm going to say about Desi Olson before I hand it to Desi Olson is that the Salt Lake City School District has more nationally board certified teachers than any other district in the state of Utah. And this is in part of 2 things. First, we have the most amazing teachers in the state. I'll just go out on the roof and say that. And second, Ms. Olson has created a systemic process of support for these teachers so that as they go through this laborious process, she'll say a few words about it, they have a mentor, they have support in putting together their applications, and they know that they are not alone in figuring out this process. And the video camera, because they have to video camera themselves. So she's the one that is able to do all of this for us. So she is going to recognize our candidates.
Thank you. It's always exciting to be here. I'm going to read just so I can get through this efficiently. We sincerely thank the Salt Lake City School District for supporting and recognizing teachers who pursue and renew their national board certification. Teachers who seek out national board certification do so on a voluntary basis because they are ready to embark on a higher level of professional growth. NBCTs recognize their professional learning and growth never ends, and they must renew their certification every 5 years through a maintenance of certificate process. And this process requires NBCTs to demonstrate their professional growth since their initial certification and how their growth has made a positive impact on student learning. Areas they address within their certificate area include best practices, content knowledge, technology, and community and parent partnerships. So I'm pleased to present our 5 NBCTs this year who successfully renewed their national board certification. They are Jill Buxbaum from Uinta, Allison Espinoza, math coach, Carrie Johnson, math coach, Mailu Olawang Emerson, and Todd Bondry at West. So thank you so much for all of your support.
And the board has some lovely certificates. So maybe I'll make you in charge of getting them to the people?
Yes.
Okay? I guess, do we want to do a photo or
Well,
just pass them? Without the teachers, we'll just, okay. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
They couldn't be here
Yes.
because of the weather warning.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so, but we appreciate the board certificates, so thank you. Thank you, Desi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to those 5 amazing teachers and the impact that you have on students' lives and going the extra mile to make sure that you have that type of recognition and certification is really great for us and our students. Up next is our consent agenda. I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
President Salazar, I move that we accept the consent agenda as it stands.
Excellent. Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and start with a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Board members. That motion carries. Up next, we'll be moving on to our study session. We'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Bates and Richard Stoll for the presentation.
Board members, I think most of us here know Richard, but Richard is the executive director of the Utah State School Boards Association. Did I say that right? And one of the services that Richard has helped with for many years across the state is helping local boards of education with superintendent searches. So we've invited Richard to come help us this evening.
And board members, before you get started, Richard, there are two handouts that Richard provided us. I'm not sure if they're in your folders or if they're outside of them. Okay.
Were they outside our folder?
Yes.
All these?
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, well, and thank you for the invitation to come and meet with you this evening. I always enjoy coming to board meetings, and that's pretty awesome about all of those national board certified teachers that you have, and to be the new ones, not all of them, those are just your new ones. So that was a great compliment to them and to your district. So with the agenda that I've given to you there, I'm just going to kind of walk down through that. I kind of like to just walk through and please ask any questions as we go along. I know some of the items that we're going to talk about here, you're probably either underway, you've had conversation about them, and I would just have to say, thanks to Superintendent Bates for having things so well organized and for you to be on top of things with this search. So anyhow, we'll just kind of walk down through those. So the first one I always like to say, and I do have for people in the audience here, I have just a few copies, extra copies of the agenda, and then also the other document, which is out of the Utah Code. So they're welcome to have them if anybody would like those and follow along. But the first item there, as I always say, this will probably be the most important decision that this board will make. And I have people say to me, no, it's not probably, it is the most important decision, and I think that's even more correct. This is a very important part of your role, the job that you have as a board, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But I think that you just need to realize that the new superintendent, is going to have a dramatic impact on your school district, as you know, and with all of the people and programs. And so there may not be a lot of changes immediately, or there may be. And so as somebody else comes in and becomes the new superintendent, then we're going to see those things. So people are interested in. And usually when I start to talk like this, the room usually gets really quiet, because everybody is listening to every word that I say, because everybody's interested in that. So anyhow, so the next one is a review of the Utah Code, and that's what I've passed out to you that's highlighted. I just want to go to those really quickly, and it's interesting of how the legislature has given you, through the code, so this is the law, has given you a lot of flexibility. Now that's not something we usually talk about. Usually there's lots of constraints and lots of ties and limits on what you're able to do. But with respect to the superintendent position, you have a lot of authority that's given to you and what you do. So for example, this first item there is that a local school board shall appoint a district superintendent of schools who serves as the local school board's chief executive officer. So it says that you're the ones that have that authority to do that as a board of education. And then the next one is a local school board shall appoint the superintendent on the basis of outstanding professional qualifications. So that's up to you then to determine what those qualifications are. So you as a board are the ones that establish those qualifications. So, and there's a little bit more there, but that is the important part for our discussion this evening, is for you to realize, yep, you're the ones who are going to appoint the superintendent. And those of you who have been on the board, you already know that, but maybe to our 2 new board members, that may be helpful for them to realize that, and then to identify those qualifications that you want to see. So, okay, let's go to item number 3 there, and that is that the superintendent search process, as Superintendent Bates had mentioned, this is a service of USBA. We don't charge you anything for that other than just the cost of printing and mailing, distributing, and then if there were websites or other things that you want us to post the notice on, or whatever that way you would like to see, or you identify or come up with something, then you would just pay that. But as far as, you know, the work that we would do from a staff standpoint, there's no cost for that to you. So anyhow, we just like to get that out there, because usually somebody will always come up and they want to know, well, how much is this going to cost the school district? So let me give you a number. Typically, and we're just right in the middle of the one for Cache School District, and I brought the brochure from there, and that's all out. Unless there's something added to that, that total cost is going to be about $1,500. So that's about what you're looking at as far as cost is concerned. And so, and I'll bet that Alan has that in your budget, probably in the paper budget. He could handle that item there. So,
Spoken like a true BA.
yeah, no more than that, huh? Okay, we'll keep it to that. He's pretty tight with the money, isn't he? Oh, that's good. You got a good reputation, Alan. People like that. Okay, so let's go down now. We're going to get down to really the meat of it here. So how many applications will we get? You know, that's always a question that comes up. And so I think that it's helpful to be able to understand just a little bit about the number of applicants. So first of all, this is a little bit of the sobering part of it, okay? And that is that, you know, there's not a lot of people that want to be a superintendent. It is a tough job. It is a 24/7 in a fishbowl. And, you know, and everybody has expectations of the superintendent being their advocate and doing what they would like to see in addition to you as a board. So the superintendent has a tough job. And a lot of the people who may be candidates will go, you know what, I would just as soon do something else in the school district. I want to be a part of it, but I will do something else. But to be the superintendent is a very challenging position. Now that's kind of the sobering part of it. The good part is that there are still a number of people out there who that is their dream, to become a superintendent. That's what they have, you know, been in education for, is and you know, and they're like everyone else. You know, they're saying, hey, you know, I would like to be a principal someday, and then I'd like to be in the district office, and you know, someday maybe I would really like to be the superintendent in a school district, because they can, and they do, make a big difference and can make a big impact in just a really positive way. And so we do have some people, but I could tell you the number of candidates is limited. And we need to realize that that's the case. So I don't know what that will be, and I don't know that I should throw out a number tonight, because I think some of it is based upon how many internal candidates that you would have in your district, and you may have, you know, a large number of them. in your school district here. You know, a district of your size, you know, there may be a fair number of candidates there. And so we just will need to keep in mind, and as we go along, that number's not going to be that great. And so I will just tell you, you know, realistically, Davis School District, I know, is a lot larger than you guys here. I mean, they're the second largest in the state. But I believe that we ended up in Davis with 14 applicants. And so the numbers are small, but the quality of the candidates, wow, is great. So that's what we're looking for. And as we go through this whole process, I like to use a description just because we've come off of the NBA All-Star game that, you know, what we're looking for here is a 5-star recruit. You know, that's who we're looking for, is that kind of a person. And there is a lot to do to be able to get those people to apply, because those 5-star recruits are recruited everywhere. And they are also maybe have a job already where they are just happy and content and they're loved there. And so, but that's the ones we want to go after. We want to find those that are so successful already and be able to bring them to Salt Lake. And there are some of those candidates out there that, you know, maybe they went to school here in Utah, or they have family here and they've moved away. Or I have a candidate today that called me, and actually that they hadn't been here, but they had some family that moved here to go to school. And so they go, well, maybe I ought to look at a job there. And so there's just lots of opportunities for us, but just keep in mind that's who we're after, and we need to know that those numbers of those candidates can be relatively small. Okay, so sometimes people think, well, we ought to have 100. Well, yeah, you should have 100, but we're not going to get 100. We're not going to get 50. We're not going to get 25. It's going to be, you know, I like to always say, let's be realistic and say maybe 10 to 12. And again, depending on how many you might have in-house. Okay, any questions on that? Any comments? That anyone has relative to that? Yeah, please.
And the candidates, are they going to be like from everywhere in the U.S., or is it going to be just focused in Utah?
Okay, great question, and I'm usually asked that question. You know, I think anymore, simply because of social media and you know, all of the data that flows back and forth through various means and websites and such, that when we put it on a website, it's usually available to people all over the United States.
Okay.
And so we've had a number of candidates that have applied elsewhere, or I mean that they're from elsewhere but have applied here.
Okay.
And so, you know, we're just hoping that we will be able to draw them from everywhere. And you know, and so like I say, some of those, you know, they may have been here or may not, but they've moved away and may be interested in coming back, and so we'll cast our net as far as and wide as we can here to get those candidates.
Thank you.
Okay, so great question, because that's a very important question. We want to make sure we get that one covered. Okay, so now let's go, you know, to number 5, I think, is another really important point that I want everybody to realize, because then I get asked that question. Okay, so are you going to screen the candidates when they come in? And the answer is no. We're not going to screen any of the candidates. The candidates that we get in, then they are actually going to come to you as a district, and we'll talk a little bit more about that if there's a, you know, a committee that's going to be involved or something that way, or just the board, or whatever that process is that you identify. But no, you're going to see every candidate that applies. I'm not going to screen any out. So, okay. So now number 6 is an interesting one. So how do we handle the information on the applicants? So that is where kind of that there can be a little rub, because as we get this opened up and people start submitting applications, then I'm going to have, one of the board members that's probably going to call me and say, how many applicants have we got in? Or we'll have, somebody else will call and they're going to go, how many applicants do we have? And so the question I have for you in that is, how would you like me to handle that? Because there's a couple of dangers that we need to be aware of and how that's handled. So here's kind of the scenario of how that plays out. So we can have, if I did and say that you called, so, Board President Salazar calls me and says, how many applicants do we have? And if I say, well, we have 8, then, and whoever then finds out about that information, they may go, oh, well, then I'm not going to apply. If they've got 8, great candidates, then I'm not going to apply. So some people see it that way, and then other people will go, oh, well, then wonder how come they only have 8? And so you get people that have that line of thinking, is the glass half empty or half full, of how people will look at it. So it can be very dangerous information of how that is used. And so you as a board need to decide, how you would like to handle that. I can tell you most boards, and so this is just a suggestion. I don't go much beyond saying a suggestion, but most boards will say, nope, we don't tell anybody, we don't share any of that information until it closes. And then I provide you a spreadsheet of the applicants and the information about them. So anyhow, that's an important one to decide what you do. You don't need to do that tonight, and it didn't need to be a formal motion. It can just be, board president says, okay, yeah, that's a process. That's how Richard handles it. It's A or B, and then we can kind of go from there, or see if you come up with a different idea. But anyhow, that's the reason why that we don't share that information unless you want it, because it can be, a little bit problematic, as I indicated there. Okay, so now down to number 7. So this is kind of the fun part of the whole process. So I'm just going to share with you, and I brought a couple of these. There's one there's Dash, and let's see, I don't want to give you grand, that's because you've seen that one.
Could have worked.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that is, there's one you haven't seen there, is from to the left, and there's the granite one.
Absolutely, thanks, Richard.
These are just some of recent brochures that we have done. And I bring those so you can have a look at it and you can kind of go, okay, this is what we want the brochure to look like. And it is very important, with a comment there from Dr. Bates. That brochure is extremely important of the way that's put together. If you read through that, and the candidates are going to read through that ever so carefully and see if there's any indication, of, is there somebody inside the district that already is going to have that job? They're going to want to know about the district, which is a lot of that information. They look for things in there that may give them an idea that, this position is certainly open, and there's not any decision that has already been made about the superintendent. And so we have to be careful with some things like, how long is it open? Is it open for 30 days? That's a positive thing. If it's open for 2 weeks, that's not a good thing, because then that says, oh, they're just wanting to hurry and get this done and not spend the time studying and putting it together. And then what's important to you, if you look over that, there's a couple of them there that have kids all over it. And that sends a message. So how that brochure is put together is really important. And I can tell you, for some reason, I don't know what it is, with that one with Cash School District right there, there's not any kids on the front. But let me tell you what, that one has attracted a lot of attention already. And that was just put on the street on last Monday, a week ago. Yeah, there's something there that that gets people's attention, and so and then the one for Granite down here that these two are looking at there. I can tell you that that was a very positive message that was communicated with that brochure. The one that you're looking at right there with Tooele, kind of interesting. That attracted some attention all across the country. We had some candidates all over with, and so you never know just exactly what it is with the brochure, the timing. There's lots of factors, but we want to make sure that that brochure communicates exactly what you want as a board. And so here's what usually happens in a district your size here. There's probably several people in your district that can put that brochure together, and that's usually what you do. The case in Granite, they had a great person there and they created that brochure. There's a couple of those that we did at our office, and so we have somebody at our office that's a graphic designer that can create those for you. But in your district, some people, they look at that as an honor. Actually, they kind of like to hang that up on the wall and go, yeah, I created that thing right there, and and they should, because it's a big deal. So anyhow, that would be just my suggestion, is that you as a district, you would probably have somebody that would do that for you. But if not, we certainly have someone that can, and we can get that created. So and again, that's part of what we do. There's not any cost to you. I was just at Wasatch School District a week ago, and to advertise for the business administrator in Wasatch. And we had the same conversation and went through all of that. And the next day, by 4 o'clock the afternoon, I had their brochure. That person got on it, and they had it created. Because, they just took some of this, and the board says, well, we like this, we like that, and we want that. And it was put together in a quick hurry. So anyhow, it's whatever you would like. I wouldn't suggest doing that. I think you need to take a little bit more time than that to get it created and get it right, and the information you want, and make sure somebody has the time and they don't have to drop everything else they're doing to get on that. But that would just be a suggestion there of what you would do. Okay, so let's go down to number 6. I thought I would put together and say, okay, so what are the next steps? Because some of you may go, okay, well, what do we do then? Where are we at, and what do we do? So these are the next steps. And my conversation with Superintendent Bates, because he's been through this, he knows what needs to be done in the next steps, and and he may already have things already well outlined, which wouldn't surprise me. But just so you're aware, kind of the next steps, you need to set a timeline. Okay, and the timeline is like, okay, so when are we going to advertise? When are we going to close? And obviously, that you need to have the new superintendent on board in July of 24. Oh shoot!
He's just testing. I think he's just testing the.
I was
margin.
thinking we could convince him one more year there, but okay. So
There's a law here that says it can't be longer than a year. So.
yeah, for temporary, but they can make a permanent thing. And I know how to do that. So anyhow, yeah. So we know when that would be, and then any other dates that you want to put in there. So let me give you just one other thing to be careful of when you start putting dates in that brochure. And that is, when you do, you better adhere to it, to that schedule. And so make sure that you have wiggle room in there. For example, that you would say that the board is going to announce the new superintendent on or before, May 15th or May 1st or whatever it is. So on or before, or something that way. and not put a specific date in there and get your hands tied. So that's just one thing we've learned, and even when you think, yeah, we've got a locked-in date here, it can change on you. So just be careful a little bit that way as we create this timeline. Okay, and then the qualifications, however the process is there that you want to get that collected, and I think you're underway on that already, of getting that gathered. So we've got a couple of things we can check off the list here. And then create the announcement that we just talked about, and we want to do, of course, a digital and a hard copy of that, so that we can get that listed on some websites. And the other part is, superintendent, we would like to have your HR department be able to list that, post that on the regular websites or the regular, whatever means that you guys get that posted or you're sending it out. Probably use, the university handshake or something that way for most of those. So we'll want to be able to have you do that as well, obviously, to get it on, your website, and we'll have it on our website. And any other place that you guys would like to see us post it, we'll do that. So just let us know, and we're happy to get that done. KSL is obviously a great place for us to get that posted. They have lots of followers there, and anyhow, we found that to be a good one. And let me just add, we have found by putting it on KSL that we don't necessarily get a lot of great candidates from that, but it's a way that people will see that on there and then they will tell somebody. And so that's what we found, why that is so valuable to us, of getting it posted there. So just something to suggest and follow up with. Okay, the next item is we would need to have an employment application form. So a district application form that you typically have, and we would just customize it, have you customize it a little bit to fit for the superintendent position. And then that way then we can put that on our website and all of the other websites. So that's an important point. We like to use your district one because your people have already got put together and have boxes to check and for people to sign off on, and we want to make sure we follow all of that same process that you have in your district here. Okay, and now down to a stakeholder committee. Again, I'm assuming that would be something that you maybe have already discussed, or have you? And you're good there then. And
talk through your conception of that.
Okay, so this would be something I would really suggest and recommend to you, and I have all the boards do that, is to have a stakeholder committee. And so let me just give you just a quick idea of what that's like, and then you can ask any questions about that you might have. With a stakeholder committee, and this is how we do it. So we just have each board member recommend probably 2 people from your area that you would like to see on this stakeholder committee. And then you as a board, or as the board president, President Salazar, the thing you do is then, along with the superintendent, go through and make sure that we then need to add some people that then represent. So we want to make sure all the administrators are represented, and the teachers are represented, and classified is represented, and community leaders. We had a legislator that actually sat on the stakeholder committee in Alpine School District, and we also had one that sat on in Granite. And the comment from Alpine, the legislator there made the comment and said, you know what, this was the most worthwhile thing that I have done, even with the legislature. Said this was more meaningful to me, and being involved in that. So, that's kind of the value of this stakeholder committee. So basically is what you do, you get that committee assembled, and then a couple of little trigger points that I like. When those applications come in, I like to have the stakeholder committee see those applications before you do. And that adds some credibility to their work, because I don't just say, hey, the board hasn't even seen these. We want you to go through these. And basically what we do, we have them sign a confidentiality agreement, and then we ask them to go through individually and read and evaluate each of the applications.
And let me be sure I heard that right. When you say they go through them individually, they don't go through them as a group. Each one does their own assessment individually. Is that?
That's correct. Individual work, so because that's what we value. We want to make sure that we get that classified employee's perspective and not have that be influenced by other people. And so they will just go through that individually and score each one of those applications. And then all of that is what then comes back to you as a board. Then for you to be able to see all of those evaluations and go through those applications. So anyhow, that's a little bit, that's kind of a high level of that, but I think all of you can begin to see, the benefit of having, people across your school district involved in that process. Now, there's a lot of work to that, and that typically takes people about 6 or 7 hours or more to go through all of those applications, because the application that comes in is going to be, almost as thick as this, typically, because people are going to provide you with the information that you request, plus a whole bunch more. And so it will take them a while to go through and read that, and most of the people on that committee will take that very seriously, and they usually read every word in each of those applications. So anyhow, again, that's just a suggestion of what you do, of having that stakeholder committee, but it's worked well, and I think it's served the school districts well. Okay, and then down to the interviews, and we can talk more about that later. I won't go into a whole lot with the interviews, just to say that hopefully you can narrow that down to about 5 people that you would interview, that you feel like that you should interview. You get more than that and it becomes a little bit cumbersome. If you could get down to 4, it's even better. But 5, again, it will take you at least all day to go through and interview 5 candidates, to interview each one of them for an hour and a little time in between. And again, you guys are so fortunate to have Superintendent Bates here to help you and kind of walk you through all of that. He knows all of these things that I'm talking about. This is old school stuff to him. But and he can set all of those things up and guide you as you go through that. The one thing that we can do with the interviews, and that is to provide you kind of a bank of questions that you could go through, and then you as a board could go, oh yeah, we like that, but we're going to change this one or add that one or something. But at least it just kind of primes the pump a little bit to give you some questions that you may feel like you want to ask. So, and that's a critical part of the process. Hopefully all of you are kind of keeping score of all of this time this is going to take. This takes a considerable amount of time for you to be able to get together and make some of these kind of decisions, or for you to talk about, the questions, for example, and the interviews and all that may be involved. And then I'm going to suggest one other thing, and I hope maybe of all the things I've said tonight, this will be one thing that you will do. And that is, when you get down to the finalists, and typically what happens, you'll get down to about 2 people that are going to rise to the top. That's just how it goes. Probably that's the way it is in every employment situation. You're going to have these 2 candidates. The thing that I would suggest to you that you would do is you would do what I call them site visits, but that you're going to go and visit. There would be like 2 of you or 3 of you that you would go and visit the school or the school district or wherever that person's at, that you would spend the time and you would go and make that visit. And I could describe to you how that looks. And I'm just, my job is really to be here to help you in every way that I can. And so I'm just going to tell you a couple of things. One thing I'm going to tell you, and that is that, and I'll use names here because I think it's okay. Jordan School District, when they hired Patsy Johnson, just before Anthony Godfrey, who's there now, they hired Patsy Johnson. And they got down there to 3 finalists. And they just couldn't, decide which one of those to hire. I mean, and it was a tough decision. So we decided we were going to do site visits. So 3 board members went to Las Vegas. Kind of crazy to thought, but anyhow, they went to Las Vegas not to gamble or to roll the dice, but they went down there and visited the district where she was at. She was, in Clark County is a huge school district, okay, and so she was like an assistant superintendent over a large area, probably, I don't know, 60 schools or something. And because of that site visit, that's why Patsy Johnson is there. If it hadn't have been for that, they would have hired another candidate, and one of those candidates turned out to be not so great. And the second one was okay after those site visits. But that's what that site visit can do for you. And so I would really, really encourage you to do that. And we could talk more about what that could look like, what you could do if that was something you wanted to. Obviously, if you have some, if it's an in-house, in-district, in-house candidate or those 3 finalists, why then, that wouldn't be necessary because you probably would know them already well enough. But if it's somebody outside of the school district, it would be well worth your while. Okay. I think, and we won't need to talk about that other one, but questions. So any questions that any of you have, and please feel free to, I think to funnel them through to, President Salazar, or the superintendent, however you want to, and they can get with me and we could get together again if we need to, or whatever we need to do to be able to answer those questions. But just more than happy to answer and do anything that we can that way to make sure you know where you're at and what you're doing, and if there was something else you want to consider. And I want you to know that this is not a cookie cutter thing here with a superintendent search. Every district is different. I can tell you, I'm helping Provo School District right now, and we have done a lot of things in Provo School District because it was something they felt like they wanted to do, and it was an idea they had. And so each one is a little bit different. I think in your situation here, you're just so fortunate, that I think, some of those things you probably are already there. And we just need to move forward and get after it. Would be just a thought that I've had. It's just how I feel about things, knowing all of you, because I know all of you pretty well. So that's just my thought, anyhow. So are we okay there? And we'll go and we'll talk about evaluations, or?
Well, hang on just a second.
Okay.
Let me,
Yeah, jump in.
So board members, I tried to keep notes as we went down. So one of the first questions that Richard asked was, do we leave the applicants with him until the closing date and not let any other, just promise each other that, well, even if we do pepper him, he's not going to tell anybody. You're going to give it to everybody all at the same time. That was one question. Anybody feel differently than
I think that's better.
that? Okay, so we'll go with that direction.
Okay, great.
I'm noticing, and you may have too, as you looked at some of these, that there's some real commonalities that run through. To my chagrin, I don't know who on our staff has those talents, but I'm confident somebody does. And so might we take a stab at putting something together? And Alan, you got that look on your face. You don't know either, or anyway, should we take a stab at putting something together, and then get it out to you, and we would draw, and I'll give you a little bit later. This was the report on the survey, the community survey that had been done, And there's a lot of information here that I think would be helpful in designing some of these. So what do you think about us taking a stab at that and then circulating that for your thoughts and that look? Yeah.
So could we do it? Can we set like an end date, say we do this in a week? Can we do it in 2 weeks? So that we have, and I think that what I'm picking up with Richard is the timeline's really important.
The timeline that we had talked about as a board before, let me remind us that, and I think we're still good. That February, even though February's only got a week left, did anybody else notice that? That's gone quick. That we would figure out the brochure, and get the brochure nailed down. Then in March we would send the brochure out. So March would really be the posting period. So maybe it could take us a couple of weeks to get this nailed down. So maybe it's the second week of March that we send it out. And so then maybe the closing is the first or second week of April. So when we get back from NSBA would be the closing. And then the month of April, the rest of April there, we would do our evaluation of candidates in terms of the interviews and so on, because the target date that we had that we talked about was trying to get to a board meeting in May to be making the appointment. Does that timeline still work? I'm seeing nods, but I don't want to.
So Martin, then,
Please.
sorry, Superintendent Bates.
Martin's fine.
You made me just lose my track.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Oh, so along with the timeline, Richard is also suggesting that, we put the stakeholder group together. So to me, that also needs to be a part of the brochure while all that's happening. When do we need to have those names to you so we can have that
April.
stakeholder group together?
That would.
So I'm just thinking, so we want to have it together in April, but when do you want the names so that then we can confirm that they can be a part of it, of the stakeholder group?
It seems to me that perhaps you would be the ones to, well, we can do it either way, that you would extend the invitation to some people in your
Okay.
precinct, or you could ask me to extend that on your behalf. Though I think it might be easier if you say, hey, can you give us a day? It could take a day. And it's there. As I've seen this, these folks feel honored, and this really is an honor to go through all of the applicants, and we'll help you with a rubric, but go through the applications of all of the applicants and give the Board of Education feedback. People are honored by that, but that might be powerful to have you be asking them.
So that's absolutely what I'm asking, but the second part of that is, so maybe the first part is if we could have those talking points that we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
That would be really important, as we talk to who's going to be on the committee.
Yep.
But the overall question for me is, what day do you want me to have those names back to you by, so that we can have that committee put together and that the community knows who that committee is? So if I have an end date of when you want me to have those names to you, that would be helpful. And we don't have to
Mid-March.
decide that tonight, but if you know, then
Well,
tell us.
if the posting closes the first week of April, then real quick thereafter is when we would want to do that.
So maybe sometime in March.
So in March, you'd be making those invitations, and I've just noted we can put together some invitation talking points.
That would be great.
So to the brochure, we'll work on that this week. We'll try to get a draft out to you early next week, a week from now, and get your thoughts back and forth on that. Is this
Yeah, that works.
this working? Brian?
President Salazar or Superintendent Bates, I have a question for the superintendent. Is that okay?
Of course.
So you gave us this probably, I think, 2 board meetings ago. It was a draft and a timeline, and to me that was well thought out. I mean, we've got, I don't know, probably about 12 points. You started with the community survey and the brochure and all of that, but what it did was it left like a column for the date. And it seems to me, because I mean, we're talking about all of these things here, it would be nice to, I don't know if this is something that we can do tonight, but to say, okay, we're going to fill in these dates so that we know what we're doing. To me, that just kind of helps drive this, but that's just a suggestion.
was a draft trend.
It was a
timeline,
draft.
David.
It was,
Timeline.
yeah, no, and that's the,
Okay.
and here's mine, that was the one that I read to you from. You can see I've written on it.
Yeah.
You paid me a lot of compliments. Thank you for those, for
You're
helping
welcome.
put that together. The way I've broken that out now, if I were sending this to you again today, I would probably say in February, the brochure work. So that's okay, number 1 is done. I'll give you the
Right.
report on that here in a minute. Well, in a bit. So 2 and 3, I'd put February there because I struggled putting, and I think you warned us against putting a specific day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
on
and
that.
I worry about that. So the next 2 would be February.
Okay.
The position posting is March. The question development is also March. The application deadline is first week of April. That's our target. The stakeholder review of applications and the board review of applications, that's really throughout April. So the stakeholders do their work first, then the board receives those and decides on interviews and so on. And really April goes the rest of the way down the column. Those occur in April.
So you're saying the stakeholder review, the board applicant review, the applicant interviews, narrowing of it, that's all going to happen?
That would all happen in April. April's going to be a,
Come back for spring break.
Okay.
is that, look, I don't think that's too aggressive. But I also don't think it's overly optimistic. I think that's
No, I think that's helpful because, I mean, we've got to follow this because the bottom date you had filled in and it was
That
May
was-
2nd.
that was the date that you
So we
that was
got to
your
get all of
target.
this done before May 2nd.
Well, and it may turn, that was the target that
Yeah.
we discussed.
Right,
So,
okay. And that made sense.
Thank you, Brian. Lydia?
I guess I'm wondering if it would be possible to have students from every comprehensive high school and then specialty high schools, especially because the survey can sent out to students. Or like, yeah.
That's up to the board. We had talked about having you appoint a couple of students as each of the board members appointing a couple of constituents.
Yeah. I guess I'm just wondering, like, if it would be possible, I guess if everyone else is nominating around, like, 2, for me to nominate, like, 3 or 4 so that it would be every comprehensive high school and then some, like, representation of specialty high schools as well.
Anything's possible. That's a policy decision you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have students involved as well. Absolutely.
President Salazar, could I make a comment about that? You know, I think that is awesome, what she has brought up there and her interest in that. I can tell you that there's not been any other district that has used students in this process. And so, you know, if you had 2 on there, just like all the rest of the board members, you're a board member, and each one of them had 2, I would say everybody had equal representation there. And
Yeah.
then when you get down to it and saying, okay, this is the committee, then, you know, probably really to you 2 there, just to make sure everybody's represented. You know, if you're at that point, then maybe you would say, you know what, let's add another student here because we don't have one from this area or that area or whatever it might be. Because that's the whole part of the process. That's you working together as a board and to ensure that everybody's represented. So at that point, you know, however you go about that, but at that point, then I think then you can go, okay, yep, you know, we heard she's expressed that, so maybe we do, or no, we've got that covered because we've got other people there. Anyhow, I think that would be, you know, seems to be kind of the united effort as a board, which is all of you here, in coming up with that. But anyhow, that will be pretty awesome to have a couple of students on there. I will be really interested to see how that turns out.
Since you're not giving me names tonight, that does give us some time to think about that, Lydia. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Richard, are we missing anything? I thought I tried to take the notes as you were talking and make sure I had. So the action step is a draft brochure that I'll send to you individually, so we're not having a meeting, and then you send your feedback back and forth to me, and we start nailing that down.
Yeah, and some of those dates, I think that, Board Member Jensen has brought up, some of those dates, can vary just a little bit as you go along, and you're going to find that they're going to, and so some of the dates you can get set, but you may not be able to set them tonight. It may be, after the next event is set, then you can set the next one. So, it takes a little bit. This is kind of a design build project here, and so, we have to just kind of take one step at a time, and then that will help us make to the next one. And
Richard's point on the posting length is that's really significant. When people see a posting that's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, their conclusion is you've already got a candidate in mind, and you're trying to narrow the number of applicants. So I think I don't have any sense that would be the case with this board at this point. So I think a 4-week posting is going to be really something that we need to look at. So the getting the brochure ready, which is the posting, and then getting that out and open, that's really that's that next step that really drives then the 4 weeks, and then we see what we do thereafter. I'm talking a lot. We doing okay?
We're doing great. Mohammed, I believe you.
Richard actually touched on that, which is, the flexibility of time. Like when we go home, we're going to look at this timeline, and we can still come up with suggestions as we go. So, but at the same time, definitely taking care of the brochure, having that foundation ready is very, very important.
We'll get to work on that.
Any other questions or thoughts from the board? Board Member Jensen.
President Salazar, can I ask Richard just one last question as a follow-up to Board Member Bayet?
Absolutely.
Board Member Bayet asked you what you had seen with applicants, and you said that you saw some that were coming nationally and that sort of thing, which I think is nice. But in our conversations earlier when we were talking about using USBA, Utah School Board Association, one of the things that I thought was positive, and I thought the other board members did as well, was this is a Utah organization that can also help us locate, because I think that there are qualified individuals within the state of Utah, and I've had lots of constituents say to me that, they think that we need to make sure that we're including candidates from Utah in this search. Has your experience been that you get applicants from Utah as well?
Well, we do. The far and away the majority are Utah applicants, and and some of them realize that. I think if you were in the state of Nevada, or maybe in Colorado, the majority of the candidates there are probably from Colorado. Because school finance and school law is pretty unique to each state.
Yep.
And so a lot of the candidates, they understand that, and they know that learning curve is so steep when they come, from outside. But we have had some candidates that, we have one out in Uinta School District that come from Wyoming, and has just done a fantastic job there. And even though they're that close, the laws are still very different, and the funding is very different. And so, I would anticipate, Salt Lake City is a very, high-profile school district. You're, capital city, and there's lots of things that way. So I would anticipate we would get, some probably more candidates from outside than we might, typically get. But the majority, I think right now, I can say probably the majority of the candidates are going to be from in-state, and hopefully a bunch of them are in district.
Any other questions from the board? I think we have a pretty good path moving forward of getting this brochure developed and getting our insights and feedback on that over the next week or two. So yeah, I thank you, Richard, for joining us. I don't see any other questions on this topic unless Superintendent, you wanted to present on the survey data, or if that comes later.
Do you want to do that now?
It's up to you. While we're on the topic, we might as well,
Okay.
if folks are open.
These are the board members. Let me hand these out. And I'll just and then we will draw from this as we're putting the brochure together. You'll see it's broken into three groups. You'll remember the questions. We talked those through with the board some meetings ago. So they're split out in three groups: parent-guardian responses, community responses, and student responses. There's a lot of similarity between, there's some real distinctions between them, and invite you to look at those.
Students, so Lydia said that students did not receive the survey, is that correct?
We did, after a couple of discussions with the board, we decided to not send the survey link to students directly, but to parents to encourage them to share that with the students. And so the number of students total turned into 125, 24 is what it says, 124 students. But that was, you'll remember, we talked about that a couple of times. But you'll see those. I invite you to look through those. I'll look through those, and as we'll use this to put the I want to say free response. That's probably not the right term. The open response. These are not direct quotes. Some of those have been paraphrased for a number of reasons. Some were more colorful than others, but those have been paraphrased and common. What's that, Mike? You have something you'd like to share? Thank you. He's making noise in the back of the room.
Now he's colorful too.
Yeah. But we consolidated some so that like ones are grouped together. So if people are looking for that particular quote that they get, they're probably not going to find a particular quote that they made, but they're grouped together, and you'll see that. These are typical responses that we received in those groups. So I invite you to look at those.
Superintendent, do you have one of these for Richard too? It might be
yeah.
helpful.
Here, I've got one right here.
Okay.
Excellent.
So,
That's all. That's what I've got on this.
thank you, Superintendent.
Sorry about that, Richard. You're taking some time.
Great. I didn't expect to get one, so that was really nice.
Well, we appreciate the conversation, board members and community. Thank you for engaging with us on this process. Richard, you're not going anywhere because you're up for the next topic on our agenda, which is board and board leadership evaluations. And we all did receive an email from you earlier today that highlighted a couple of different tools and some key performance indicators that are being used by school boards here in the state of Utah. And I would just, thank you for that, number one, but also turn the time over to Board Member Jensen, who brought this topic to our board agenda, and just to introduce the topic, and then we can hand it back over to you for the presentation element of it.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, Richard, for forwarding that. And I contacted the president and let him know that I'd spoken to you and that you were sending it. So I think that that's helpful to have that template that relates to board evaluations. One of the things that I would say to the board when we brought this up for study, one of the things that we referred to was the board handbook. And I got out the board handbook and went through it again, and well, anyway, without spending a lot of time, you can see lots of yellow tabs, and every one of those yellow tabs relates to somewhere where I have highlighted board member responsibility. And I think that as board members, we're all responsible for being familiar with the board handbook. But I think that one of the things that we could do when we're looking at the evaluation that Richard sent us would also be to use our handbook so that it's pertinent to our particular board. And I think that, you know, boards across the state are probably very similar, but I think that it would be helpful for us to be recognizing, you know, the directions that we're receiving from the board handbook. And I know, Christy, you said that we needed to do a few updates in the board handbook, and I mean, that's something that we're going to be working with on that policy committee. But anyway, as I went through it, I thought it was really helpful for me to, I mean, I'm just using an example. This is over on page 4. And it says the Student Achievement Plan. And it says board members should be familiar with the SAP and assure that it is guiding the work of the board and the district. Well, I think that as some of those things, when we're reading through it, we just kind of gloss over it and stuff like that. But I think that if we're going to be effective as a board, that we need to have a commitment to one another, that we're aware of what we've been directed to do in the handbook, and that we're following, you know, the instructions that are in there.
No, I appreciate that, Board Member Jensen, and throughout our discussions that we've had, either individually or publicly here, and after reviewing the tool that Richard provided us this afternoon, I think there's an easy pathway to developing key performance indicators, if that's the language that we want to use, from the handbook into a tool like that. And there are some that are already there in some ways as I reviewed them today. So
Right.
I think that's a very wise suggestion that you're bringing to us. Thank you. Anything else, or should we turn it over to Richard and the experiences that school boards have and districts have with a tool like that, specifically for boards and board leadership?
Yeah, so let me just, and so thank you for letting me mention and discuss with you for just a minute. I'm sure my time's probably up, but let me just mention a little bit about, and the comments that Board Member Jensen has already brought up is certainly really important. It's an important part of what this evaluation tool is all about, and that is to keep this in mind. This is to be for you, and we're going to customize that to meet your needs. And so this is just a template here that we start with, and so we have boards go through it and say, okay, make any changes, additions, whatever that you would like to that evaluation tool, so that it is meaningful to you. And the thing that that I would suggest maybe that you would do as a board is get that input, and however you handle it, back to Board Member Jensen, if he's going to kind of be your point person, and then he could send that to me, and we certainly would update that. And then this tool, even though I sent it to you electronically, and I brought a hard copy in case somebody wanted to see a hard copy of it, this will be electronic. And so the thing that we would do is that once we get the tool created, then we would just send out a link to each one of you, and then you would go online and fill that out, and then we will prepare a report for you, give you all of the summary of the data with some charts and so forth, and then we'll provide you, and it's all anonymous and confidential, but we would provide to you then all of the data question by question, so you could see how everybody scored those. So anyhow, it's pretty easy. If you get, you know, the questions right here, we can bring you back some pretty good information for you as a board to look at. And, you know, and I found that most boards, the thing that they will do is they'll follow that process. Some don't. Some just say, no, we just want to use it like it is. But when you will customize it, take the time to do that, and then we bring you that data, then I think then boards can be able to say, okay, here's a couple of things we need to work on, okay, and not make it a long, drawn-out process for either one of these tools. You know, I think it's kind of a thing that we get on, we get you the data, and then you guys say, okay, and now, you know, here's what we're going to do, or not do, whichever it is. But don't make it a long, drawn-out process to where it takes, you know, 3 months to go through it. Then it's counterproductive to do that. Everybody will go, man, we're tired of hearing about the evaluation tool. You know, so make this whatever it is. And whenever you do it, you know, it's great with us. We're just more than happy to jump in and customize it for you to meet your needs that you have as a school district, and that applies to all 3 tools.
Thank you so much.
I just have one question,
Please, go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, so this evaluation, it's going to go out to the community, is that correct? To evaluate the board and leadership, is that correct?
Okay, so very, very good question there. And that is, you know, how far and wide do you send it out? You know, is this something, and I can tell you quite often that boards will go, you know what, let's just have this just as the board. We just complete it as a board here, the evaluation, and collect that data. And then we will have, you know, other boards that will go, you know what, let's ask, you know, some of the district office staff, or, you know, and you guys determine how far, you know, that you go down with that. Because sometimes you'll send it to people and they'll go, I don't know if the board does that. I don't know, you know, they don't understand, you know, the work that you do. They could understand, but they're not aware of it, the work that you do. And so then it doesn't become that meaningful or helpful. So anyhow, I hope, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, because the reason I was thinking is like we're all elected by our communities, and I think, you know, people do have a certain perception of the board, and involving the community in that process of like telling us, hey, you're doing good at this, or you really stink at this. Knowing what's going on is going to help us all as a board and also as a district, because we are, you know, representing our community, and they trust us with their kids and their education, and to just, you know, where I see it.
Okay, thanks, Mohammed, and I
Thank you.
think that's something that we'll decide move forward and
Absolutely.
figure that out. But I think there's some logistical pieces that are on my mind. You know, first, you know, to just going back to the handbook, I'm wondering if the policy subcommittee could get moving on those changes, you know, and because they are, you know, pretty important. Even just the example we used, that needs to be changed and updated to strategic plan, for example. And I know there's other little elements in there, and I'm wondering if this process also might fit into our timeline of our next agenda item, which is the board retreat, and
Yeah.
maybe getting policy subcommittee and the board adopting those new changes to the handbook. We could finalize the tool at the retreat, for example, or we could follow Richard's suggestion of having Brian be our point person from the board. Probably all decisions that we can't make tonight, but certainly ones that we could be thinking about as we move this process forward. But I think the updates to the handbook are probably the first priority. Board Member Will?
And just a clarification, I don't believe it's the policy subcommittee. We established that as a separate
That's right.
committee. Just want to clarify that.
It's a ad hoc committee.
Christy, did you have it? Okay. Are there any other thoughts relative to this? Okay, and I think, you know, Bryce and I can kind of figure out, you know, offline, you know, what process works best, unless we want to make that decision now, or if we want to wait and hear the timeline kind of structure for the retreat and kind of figure that out in the next meeting or so. Does that work for folks?
That's good.
Richard, what I understand, you're ready to jump in and help however, at whatever
Yeah.
timeline works for us.
Yeah, whatever the board would like to do, and to whatever that breadth of it is, you know, we will make it work, whatever you would like.
Christy, you had your hand?
I just want to take a moment and thank Richard for being here tonight. It's been such a pleasure to work with you over the years, and I can just tell you that from my own personal experience that USBA does a stellar job, you know, of doing these searches. And although it's everyone's first experience, working with USBA doing that, along with our community, most of them, I just wanted to let you know that I have every confidence in USBA and in Richard's ability to help guide us through this. So thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate that, and I think that the evaluation tool that you talked to us about will also be very helpful as we start to move forward and look towards hiring somebody to be our new superintendent when Superintendent Bates leaves, which I think will be helpful to look at that evaluation tool at that time. So thank you again for being here tonight.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Richard, for your
Thank you,
time.
Richard.
Thank you.
Get home
To
safe,
all of you.
Richard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Up next on the agenda is our board retreat planning. This is something that that the board has historically done throughout the years. Pandemic made it a little more challenging. In some recent just years, it's just been a bigger challenge than it has in the past. Vice President Williams and I put together a kind of a process or a proposal document. I don't know if everybody's had the chance to review that yet. We don't have it printed out, but it is linked to an email that April sent out last week. So if we just give a minute to get that out to folks, or if we can get some copies made, that'd be great. But before we get started into that, Vice President Williams and I wanted to just hand out some information. We attended the superintendent, with the superintendent, the vice president and president workshop at the Nebo School District. We were joined by presidents and vice presidents of school boards from all across the state. It was a great experience and opportunity. I think the thing for me that was most, and this is part of our report back to the board, as one of the expectations that we have for ourselves when we attend trainings or conferences like this. So I wanted to share the agenda with you all of what we experienced. For me, aside from the food,
You certainly enjoyed the food.
Yes, we did. We had a really, my takeaway was just learning more about Robert's Rules of Order. Rob Smith, the BA of Alpine School District, presented out to all of the presidents and vice presidents. I thought it was a really great experience, and he brought a lot of fun into it, which was always a good thing as well. And then just hearing from superintendents and board leadership from the two school districts that you see here, from Nebo School District and Sevier School District as well, and just hearing how they do things. It was really enlightening to me, and I learned a lot from everybody. And then, of course, just building those relationships with BA superintendents and board leaderships from around the state was really beneficial. I don't know, Bryce, if you had anything that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think my perception and my experience was similar to President Salazar's. What I really appreciated was getting to hear again from those two different boards about how they conduct their board meetings, how often they meet, things of that nature. I wouldn't say I'm a new board member, but relatively new, a year and a half. And just to be able to notice and recognize that not every district or every board does things exactly the same was beneficial, and not advocating that we change how we're necessarily running our meetings, but it does put things into perspective down the road if that was something we wanted to explore.
And then passing those around. So I have some hard copies of what was sent out in the email last week. So what you'll see here is just proposed objectives, if we want to use a facilitator or not. Professional development. These are all elements that Bryce and I felt like we heard from everybody on the board that were really important in our next retreat. So I can just kind of go through these. So the objectives, and again, these are just proposals, so keep that in mind. But getting to know you and your story, identifying and building on each other's strengths. That's something that Bryce and I gathered from our new board member orientation and USBA conferences that we've all attended. Identifying new board goals and reevaluating existing board priorities that complement the strategic plan for student achievement and the budget. Training, orienting, and developing board norms. These are all things that we've been hearing about. And then calendaring is a big topic that we felt like we've heard from everybody on the board. I just put two examples. There's two different ways that I've experienced calendaring in my 4 years on the board. One is where everyone brings items to the retreat, and we schedule those out in board meetings throughout the year. Or we lean on newly developed board goals that are more measurable, that are more umbrella oriented type of goals that really direct student achievement throughout any given school year and throughout the term of the strategic plan for student achievement as well. Facilitator or no facilitator, we've used a bunch of facilitators in the past. We could bring those folks back in, we could bring in a new facilitator. It really is our decision. I do know that there's a lot of folks that would be interested in helping us out with that as well. Professional development. This is the other component that we felt like we heard from everybody when this new board took office and started working in January. So these are just some of the things that we felt like we heard. So Robert's Rules. We did talk with Rob Smith, who's the gentleman that provided the training at the board leadership conference or training a couple weeks ago. He's open to working with us and coming and presenting on that. Again, if we would like that. A board handbook, getting items on the agenda, removing items, a lot to what we've been talking about already this evening. Relationship with board counsel, who's Joan Andrews from Fabian Bancott. Communications, that's either with each other, with constituents, or the media. The role of board members and what the board role is as a whole. Specifically, not getting into the weeds of the day-to-day operations. Role of the administration, the org chart, the chain of command, the written agreement and what is shared governance, and then of course our policy and budget committee work. So these are just things that we felt like we've heard from everybody. We don't think that we can fit all of these topics into one retreat day, but we wanted to be comprehensive in the feedback that we've gotten from everybody and open it up to a conversation about what this board would like us to focus on in planning this retreat with you all and of course with the superintendent and his cabinet. Bryce, is there anything that you would want to add to that intro?
I don't believe so. I'm very interested in hearing what you all, as our colleagues, think moving forward.
I'll open it up for questions or thoughts. Mohammed?
Yeah, thank you. This is really, it's a lot of information, a lot of things to cover. And if I may suggest, now that we have this, that each, personally, I would like to have it at home, look at it, think about it, and then, we will send the points that I personally think are good, and that will facilitate the process because for the sake of time here, we're not going to be able to cover it all and give it a proper amount of time.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
I agree with that. And then how do you want to manage the calendaring portion of it, knowing the same thing? We don't all need to go through our calendars right now. So if we're messaging you about topics, how would you also like to move forward on the scheduling component?
I think that's a decision that the board's going to have to make if we want to adhere to a precedent, I guess. And I don't know if it's always been that way, Christy, but my first couple of years on the board is where we all brought topics together. In the past couple of years, I think when Jenny and Mohammed joined the board, we worked with the facilitator about creating 3 to 4 SMART goals that are measurable, that really direct the superintendent.
Sorry, President Salazar, I mean literally like scheduling the
Oh,
retreat.
excuse me.
Have the retreats typically been on Saturdays, or what's?
It depends.
It depends. I think that it's varied, from right after NSBA coming back in April, like in May, all the way to August. But I think that maybe take the opportunity just to peek our thought process, as Mohammed has said, that I think the timing of this is really important because we're going to be very intense working with in April of hiring a new superintendent. Superintendent Bates is going to be leaving. And so if we're going to be doing this work, I would think that we would want to look towards more the fall, of putting this together with the new superintendent. And I think there's some things that we can certainly talk about, on the list, but I am on the same page as Ashley, that if there are, then let's calendar those and look at that. Maybe identify that after, what Mohammed said, look at it as board, come back. But my preference would be that we look towards the fall after we have a new superintendent in to be able to go through, because I think there's some really important pieces in here, that will set the tone for our calendar and our meetings for the remainder of the school, for that school year.
Okay. Thanks, Christy. I appreciate that. Are there any other thoughts? I think what I'm hearing is that we want to sit with this document, And I think to your point, Ashley, if you want to send topics our way through our normal process in the handbook.
Perfect.
You know, this needs to be on the agenda. Here's my second. That would be ideal. And otherwise, you know, maybe we set, you know, another time to discuss this in March and kind of figure out what we want to do moving forward. If it's the fall, if it's sooner than the fall, but let's just sit with that and figure that out over the next few weeks.
President Salazar, if someone from district can have us like have a shared spreadsheet, and that way we're not gonna have overlapping information. Let's say Ashley has a topic, I see it in there. There is no reason for me to write it there again, just for sake of time.
April's thinking about that already.
Thank you, April.
Thank you, April.
You're the best.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Anything you wanted to add?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. Moving along to the report section of the agenda, I'll turn it over to Paul Schulte on a report on feasibility studies. Paul, thank you for joining us and for all your efforts up to this point and moving forward. I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you this wintry evening. Here's all hoping for a good evening and not as much snow as the forecast calls for. Appreciate the time to be with you and share out on the feasibility study. I will tell you this has been one of the more enjoyable assignments that I've had in my career. And I want to give kudos to everyone that's participated, from the architects to the stakeholders, the feasibility. It's just been a great experience. But just to walk you through a little bit, the next slide, Sam, thank you. Back in last August, the board empowered us to do an RFP and go out and select a couple of architects to work through this feasibility study. I will tell you that it was very competitive, the selection process of these architects. The architects in the Valley, those that we have relationship, wanted to be part of this committee and have this process with Salt Lake School District. And it was we were very thorough. We went out and visited multiple schools that the different architects had worked on, and we interviewed them, and so it was very rigorous and very competitive to be selected. We selected Naylor, Wentworth, and Lunn architects to head up the feasibility study for Highland, and VCBO architect to head up the study for West High School. And we wanted to make sure we actually thought that it would be best to have two different firms because this was going to be so involved. You can just see the next slide. We didn't put the dates on this, but just kind of the overall timeline of what we did, some of the different activities. I want to say that I'm very, very proud. We're going to talk about this in a couple of slides of how all the different stakeholders had a voice in this and had a party and were involved. I think kudos to what I think is the Salt Lake District way of doing things. And so we really worked hard to make sure we got everyone involved. And so we're very proud of that work. We understood the assignment from the board as two primary assignments. The first, and this is a little different than a lot of our colleagues throughout the state. Sometimes folks build schools and they have a wide open field and they can just go for it. And we have some constraints. We have campuses that are smaller than the average campus. And so trying to find a way to, the best way to build and place a building on these campuses was one of the main assignments that we had. And it was challenging, but I will highlight at the end that I think we came away with something that exceeds my expectations. And the second one was to get an accurate number. It's a crazy market out there. The economy's the likes that most of us haven't seen. And so we wanted to give you, the board, the information they might need to make the appropriate fiscal decisions going forward. So on those two assignments, we had basically 5 different standards. They came in and worded differently in different documents, but basically 5 standards that we use to come to the conclusion on those two assignments. The first one is we feel like, though we may have some constraints with campus and these type of things, that Salt Lake City students shouldn't be shortchanged. They should have the best educational facilities in the state. We shouldn't shortchange them because of maybe some perceived restrictions. Second is we are the capital city. We have some of the older buildings, but also most rich heritage and history, and we wanted to make sure we recognized and honored that throughout the process. Number three, we wanted to see how can we do this without disrupting students, or at least the least amount of disruption. And many of you are familiar with some of the projects that have gone on in neighboring districts, and that sometimes is a challenge. So we were very conscientious about that. Obviously, we want to build it the most cost-effective way while honoring these other standards. And we also remember back in 2020, we adopted a district sustainability plan, and we wanted to honor that. So those are the 5 standards we agreed in both feasibility committees. This is the slide, like I previously alluded to, that I'm very proud of, our public engagement, the work that we did to get out and listen to, and I want to emphasize this, to all of our stakeholders. And we had many public meetings. We had 3 public meetings in both high schools. We had a lot of community meetings, SCC meetings for the feeder patterns. I went to many of those SCC meetings and very much enjoyed the feedback and collaboration with the SCC meetings from the feeder schools. The reality is the students that are in elementary schools are probably going to be the first students that will be walking into these hallways. Over 12 community meetings, so different community council meetings were attended by myself and or the architects. Lots of staff meetings. I think we can be confident that the teachers feel like they had a voice and they were an active part of this process, and we wanted to hear. They're the experts. They're in the classroom every day, and we wanted to make sure they had a voice. And then between both processes and both communities, we had over 2,000 survey responses. So if you look at this from 10,000 feet, that's what you call a model for getting the community involved and hearing from all the stakeholders. So we're very proud of that. This is just the members of the steering committee. I was very fortunate to be involved in both groups, as well as my right-hand man, Todd Palaga, and Dr. Taylor and Dr. Hall, and then the principal, and we had one teacher from West High, Suzanne. This is a great group. We're going to start with Highland High. Go Rams.
Go Rams.
I'm a little bit biased, but I want you to know we did it alphabetical, so there's no one can.
There's no Ram fan bias there.
11 years is a long time, folks. So at Highland, basically, it worked out that we were looking at 3 locations, 2 on the north orientation, the north part of the campus, and 1 on the south. If you look on the handout, you can see vaguely an outline of where the current building is. Okay. So let me just kind of walk you through each side just briefly. Option 1, okay, it's about 77 months of construction, and there's 4 phases in that construction. This is some real cool stuff here. No portables are needed for academics, so we don't have to displace the children. They can stay in the original building while we build the new one. That's a huge lift. This is very fun, having any of us that have dealt with parking over there. We won't lose any parking stalls while we're building, and we probably will gain some. So that's a pretty cool opportunity. And there you can see the estimated costs. Number 2 is also a north option. Okay, a little bit shorter period of construction, excuse me, 3 phases. We do have to use some portables or relocation, and I want to just take a quick pause. Remember, this is a feasibility study, so we haven't dug into all the roots and about things. We don't know exactly what the construction plans. That'll be a committee in the future that would put those together. So these things are from 10,000 feet. They're not exact, but best guess at this point, or estimate, I guess I would say. But we would need to have some portables and some alternative space with this option. And again, no loss of stall parking, and perhaps some increase in parking. And there's again the estimated cost. And number 3 is the south end of the campus. The south portion, again, approximately about the same time in 3 phases. This one's a little more intrusive. We have to look at some relocation of the band and the choir, CTE, fine arts, photography. A lot of that, those of you who are familiar with Highland High, is the south end of the building. We'd have to find some additional spaces. We would lose some parking. We would lose some facilities, athletic facilities, and the loss of the driving range. So somewhat intrusive, I guess it would be a way of saying. So the feasibility committee, after looking at everything, the preferred option, and again, I want to emphasize that ultimately any decision based on which direction we go will lie with this board, but the preferred option from the feasibility is option 1. Again, we think it's just great that we could build a building and not have to disrupt the children. Okay, the additional parking during construction is amazing. No loss of sports. It does say there soccer will play on football fields. I will mention that I haven't reached out, but having been there before, I would certainly say that Sugar House Park is an option, because years ago we played soccer and baseball in the park. So that's just a statement there, but that's not, the only option. The other options. You can see the costs. All of these costs are right around $300 million. And you can see that that's a 2024 number, so that is if we broke around a year from now. And then each year after that, there's about a 4 to 5% increase, inflationary costs. It's also very important to note on the last bullet that the orientation is very optimal for sustainability, with it facing to the south. It helps us out with heating and cooling and these type of things, natural lighting into classrooms and things like that. So that's the preferred option, but you have all the options in front of you. I don't know if you want to pause for any questions on Highland, or you want me to get all the way to the end.
I think, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if it's possible, like I've taught in a reload before. I don't know if everybody in the audience knows what a portable is or what that
Sure.
means when we're talking about that.
Sure. Just real briefly, what it is take a trailer, double wide, and it's a classroom.
Make it a classroom.
I think that's, and I've taught in a portable. A lot of us that have been in the business has not the optimal teaching environment. It does work, and you can make it work, and people have. But boy, if we don't have to use that option, that's a great thing.
Board Member Sweat.
So 6.5 years.
Correct. Now, let me break it down for you a little bit, because that sounds really...
I just want to like...
And it's really important to understand that one bullet of saying that you're going to stay in your building is crucial, right? Because it's not like you're going to be in portables for 6.5 years. But that proposed preferred option, the first phase is a site preparation. Okay. Second phase, which would be the longest, we would building the new building while you're in the old building. The third phase, and so I want to emphasize, so you're in the old building while the new building's being built. So you're looking at 3 to 4 years, but you're still you're in your classrooms. You're in Highland as you know it. So that's the positive piece. And then the third phase, you move into the new building, most of it, and then you take down the old building. And so with this phase, we still have to build just a little bit at the end, like the library and some things like that. Okay, and then at the end, as well as the third phase, some of the athletic facilities. The fourth phase is making some new parking lots, and also what we're hoping for would be some geothermal, which is the sustainability. It's basically you bury your pipe so you can enhance your heating and cooling. So 6.5 years really is not about, you're not displaced, and for a large portion of it, Highland, as you know, is functioning, actually for over half of that.
For over half of it.
And in the second half, you're in the new building. So
While it's going on.
yeah,
So,
while we're taking down
right,
the old building.
While we're taking down the old building. So as I think about this over that 6.5 years, whether you're building or you're taking down, where is the staging happening?
Well, those are the things that are not all sorted out yet.
Okay.
Okay, so that's...
Because there's not a lot of room there
Mhm.
at Highland. And so as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, you want something that's close by, obviously. So, but that's not determined yet.
We haven't sorted
Haven't
all
gotten that
but
far
our
out.
architects are very confident that they can pick up. To me, that's a great question, but when I couch it with, I can pick up from parking, they believe there's some good options there.
They think there's some good options
Because
there.
what happens with staging is the real downside is you lose your parking.
Right.
So that's, so our confidence is high.
So I know that Jeremy's in the audience too, but one of the things that was brought up to me was the safety of the kids going just to the bus stop across the street at 21st, because they'll have to come out of the building. There'll be construction that'll be going on. So I think that, that's not going to be in your wheelhouse, but it'll be a part of the conversation that we have out in the community, is the safety of the kids as they go either to catch the bus or across the street. We have a lot of kids that
Use
ride
UTA to the north there.
right, and so it's something that it's just so compact right there. But
And I
that's-
might add that just, it's kind of in connection with the rebuild and could
Right.
feed over to this concern is in collaboration with the city. So John Larson in Transportation is communicating with us.
Great.
We're doing some traffic study on 21st as well as 17th has already been done. And so I think the organic and the relationship with the city will set us up for that type of meaningful
Yeah, because
dialogue.
what would be nice is to be able to see that bus stop move, from that corner and be closer to Highland.
Yeah.
you
And
know,
that's
so
a
that they're not-
UTA issue.
Yeah,
But
it is.
UTA
But we
is
can
on
work
the
with them, right?
Transportation Advisory
Okay.
Board, which I sit on. So we have some really organic relationships that will help
Right.
that happen. And the Transportation Advisory Board, I'll be reporting to them next month.
Right.
But they're aware that these feasibility studies have been done.
So just my last comment then is to say thank you, because I think that the community meetings, that I've been able to attend and then also listen to, feedback from the community has been really great, and it's been positive. There's all those lingering, questions that are out there. And I think that option one seems to one that has risen, but the 6.5 years is a little bit hard but I think if we have a good plan and they know what that looks like and going forward, because I think you did a really good job, Paul, and so did the architects, of talking about how it had to be built in stages.
Correct.
That there just isn't any other way to do that. So, thank you.
And understand too, just to point out that the smallest time is 5 3/4 of a year. So we're, tomato, it's, yeah.
Lydia?
I guess option 2, as you said, just has like a little bit shorter of a time.
Mhm.
Are there any other like advantages or like major reasons to do option 2 and 3? I guess especially 3, because it kind of seems like everything on here are like cons.
Yeah, so 3 was a tough one, and I will tell you, as a biased, having been there, that's where I thought would we land. I thought we would land to the south. That kind of sounds a little weird, but yes, that's what I thought we'd end up with. But as you dig into it a little bit more, it actually, when you talk about that bullet number 3, it impacts the student's educational experience significantly. When you start moving band and choir and fine arts and the CTA, it's a little overwhelming. It just really stands out. But we had it just for both of these folks. You need to understand, we started out with like about 12 different options. It was a very in-depth piece, and then things started to rise. But that was the biggest thing, is how we, and we've talked a lot, and I won't go down this pipe, this bird too far, but we've talked a lot about recruiting kids and students and sustainability. And when you start moving programs like band and CTE and stuff, we always worry about the impact it could have on people maybe opting to a school that's nearby that's not having that impact. But when we can say we're not going to impact those programs, we feel confident we won't have that impact on the student population.
Thank you, Paul.
Good.
Any other questions relative to Island?
Okay, go Panthers.
Go Panthers.
All right. Good. Oh, go back. Here's a couple of just real rough pictures. So I apologize. This is on 21st and looking east, and this is just an aerial view for the north end of the campus. Okay, thank you. All right, West High School. I want you to know I have a daughter that graduated from West High, so I got my buy-in. So West High, we have 4 options that we looked at. I'm going to go through those. Again, emphasizing these are the 4 that the feasibility committee felt about going forward with. We looked at, like I said, up to a dozen. All right, option number 1. This is actually preserving the original 1920 building. So this is interesting. Most folks, when they look at it, don't understand how many different additions, remodel, and different work has been done on West High. Kudos to all my predecessors for the great work and keeping that facility going and providing a great environment for instruction. It's really quite amazing what has been done over the years. So even if you look at the main building and you can see that picture on the bottom, most folks think that's the original building. But that end on what would be your left-hand side was built later on. So this is actually about keeping just the original 1920 building. That's why I took some time to emphasize that. It's about 8.5 years. Again, sometimes don't be deceived by that, because 8.5 years, start all the way to the finish, obviously. And there's 7 phases. On this one, the east side of the building where the ball fields are, that would be kind of like become a portable camp. We'd have a lot of work. We'd have to have a lot of the students going over there to receive their instruction. And you can see the approximate cost is just over $4 million. 400 million. If it was 4 million, we'll break. If it was 4 million, we'll break ground tomorrow.
Let's go right now, please.
Let's go.
Let's break ground.
All right. Okay. Option number 2. This one is where if you can look at the yellow line there, that's the facade, and you can look at the picture. That's just a picture of the facade, and it's actually keeping the facade and then building new buildings behind the facade is what this is trying to do. Okay. Again, 8.5 years, 7 phases. Again, we would have a need for lack of a better way, saying a portable village on the across the fields, across the street, and the approximate cost is somewhat similar, 415 million. Thank you. Option 3.
Paul, let me make sure this is something I hadn't picked up on before. When you say portable village, so I'm seeing the yellow dotted line, that's what would be preserved?
Correct.
And so everything behind it's going down. That means for 5 years the whole school would be in relocatables.
That's correct.
Okay,
that's not a misprint. That is correct. Thank you. Option 3 is building a new building on the east side. Okay. There's 5 construction periods. No portables are needed for academics. So the brand new main school would be done in 3 years. So the brand new academic building on the east side is done in 3 years. It would take another 4 years to finish up maybe gyms, ball fields, these type of things. But it's pretty cool to think that from start to finish you could have the students in their academic space without disrupting them in the current building, and then into a new building in 3 years. And the approximate cost is just over 300,000 million. I'm having a hard time with the numbers today. Maybe that's a sign.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, but $400,000 million.
$4 million.
Yeah. It's a lot of money. Read the number. Okay, now here's an interesting piece. Again, kind of like Highland, I thought for years, I've always brainstormed how would we do West High and these type of things. And this is the option I thought would probably work best, but option 4, Sam. Thank you. This is building to the south. So there's no preservation. So the whole building, I need to go back. I apologize. Go back to 3. So really crucial part of 3, is that we would keep the entryway into the building to honor the history of West High School. We're really excited about that. Would be an entry into the athletic facilities and these type of things. And so we would keep a portion of the original facade. That original doorway and entryway would be retained into the building's auxiliary services on the west side. Sorry about that. Excuse me. Get too excited. Option 4, like I said, is really tearing down the entire original building and building to the south. You can see very long time frame, 10 years. All right. The upside is there's 9 phases. There are no portables needed because you'd actually be building it to the south. Most folks don't understand the property that we own to the south of the building. It's quite extensive. It goes quite a ways. So the academic tower is done in 3 years, and then 7 years to do all the other things, because you'd have to be tearing down field houses and athletic facilities and things of this sort. So significant disruption to the athletic facilities. And the cost is, let me see if I can do this, 386,000 million. No?
No.
How come I keep saying that?
Construction
Still not
method.
there.
Yeah.
386 million.
Million.
470,000.
Yes, I keep saying thousand.
Alan,
All
you
right,
need
so
to
everybody's
sit
gonna
down.
remember my presentation tonight.
They're only gonna,
That was my plan.
they're only gonna remember 4
Everybody
million.
would come
That's
home.
all they're gonna remember is
That's
4
right.
million.
Okay. So our preferred option from the feasibility committee is option 3. We'd like it because it has a capacity to preserve some of the historic components of the building, that historic main entrance. It's most economic. It's 111 million less. Thank you.
There you go.
It's the fastest in the sense that children and our students would be in a new instructional academic building in 3 years. So it's the smallest impact. The students wouldn't have to go into portables. And again, there's the cost. So we just feel like that hits all the standards that we put at the beginning.
Oh, is there a sky bridge?
Well, great question. There is not. There is precedence of working. Dr. Bates could actually speak to this a lot. I mean, there's a number of them in the Granite District. Just up the street from my home is Benyon, and they have one going right over, I think that's 62nd?
6200.
Yep, 200 South. So there is precedence. That is a UDOT road, so it's not a city negotiation, but it's something we feel like we can do.
That you can do?
Yep.
I noticed that there were the red lines on option 3 on this page. You know, where you have that red line right there?
Correct.
I wondered if that's what that was the sky bridge.
Potential, yeah.
Okay.
Other questions about? Yes.
How many floors is the main building on option 3?
The 3
Three
floors.
floors?
Other questions? Yeah. Oh, yep, let's go to the pictures.
There you
That's looking kind of cool. And this, I really like that one. You can kind of see a hypothetical of the main entrance. Again, let me emphasize, this is a feasibility study. It is not chiseled in stone by any stretch. Ultimately, our job was to bring information to the board. And if Paul could remember to say million instead of hundreds of thousands, would have been a great presentation. But we feel great about the work. We feel very good about the community engagement. I want to publicly thank both architects. I think they've put a lot of great work into getting us some great information for you. I don't know if there's other questions.
Thanks,
I
Paul.
have a question.
Actually,
Oh, you can go
before
ahead
we go, I just want to add on to what Paul had mentioned. Like, this is just a report, right? The board, we're not going to be making any decisions tonight about these options. This is really the district and the administration and Paul coming back to the board, reporting on the work that they've done in this process so far. So we're not here tonight to make any decisions. We probably won't be making any decisions for a number of months because there are things that we have to think about in tandem with these options, which primarily is going out for bond. You know, that is something that we're really gonna have to think seriously about the timeline of, and that it has an impact on all of our processes and the cost of all these options moving forward. So to the community, we really appreciate the advocacy that we're getting on both sites, in particular West. But please know that we're not making any decisions tonight and probably won't be for a number of months as we sort through these options, as we digest them and figure out our timeline moving forward of these options, of course, in coordination with bond as well. So I just want this board and to be aware of that and the community to be aware of that. Paul, thank you for reporting on this. I'll open it up for questions. Board Member Anderson.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I've had a lot of emails about West, as I know we've all had messages, about both of these schools. A lot of this, I really want to thank all the students who wrote me messages. I had a lot of students reach out specifically to advocate for option 3, and I can keep talking in the dark, and knowing that they would not be in portables for so long. But one of the things that I've also heard about not from students, but from preservation advocates, is about whether or not we have some type of partnership or communicated with Ogden School District, which was able to preserve a different high school. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to some of the ways we may be similar or different than the situation in Ogden.
Yeah, it's great. We've talked about Ogden all the way through in our feasibility meetings, the public meeting, and also the committee. And it's kind of a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison, because Ogden High is a much more robust and detailed example of Art Deco architecture. So it was built on a what they call a WPA project with master craftsmen from all over the country. And so it was a different type of construction at the time. It was also added to the National Register back in '83, I believe. And in '04, it had a National Trust for Historic Preservation, about $10 million grant back then. So it got lots of different support, and it's been a preservation site for years. Most folks don't understand that West, and I kind of alluded to this just briefly, it has been, again, kudos to all my predecessors, but there has been additions, expansions, and different things that have been just over the years made it functional for the students of Salt Lake City, but much more different situation than Ogden High. Lots of renovations over the years, and it wasn't, the focus was student achievement and student learning, not so much preservation. And that's not an insight on anybody. I think that's where the focus should be. So Ogden High has been preserved over time. It's been a focus, and it initially was designed significantly different than West High.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Comment.
Board Member Jensen.
Mine goes along with the preservationists a little bit. So in that third option,
Yes.
the one where they're preserving the entry, and when you were, or when the architectural firms were looking at that, were they meeting with art historians or architectural historians? My question is, early Utah art is a significant part of our community, and East High and West High, we lost the East High building, and I mean that was challenging for that community. But both of those schools, there were significant contributions made by the individual Lee Green Richards, that's the Capitol Rotunda, and Mahan Rai Young. And
Yes.
so I have gotten emails from individuals that reside in West, but also individuals that don't reside there, that still have a strong feeling that we need to consider what we can do to preserve those things. So,
Go ahead.
okay.
I'm excited to
Just,
answer.
just an example. On those south entrances into East, there are these sculptures that are eroding and stuff like that. But that was Mahan Rai Young. And Mahan Rai Young is a nationally recognized artist. So, sculptor, artist, okay. So is there something when we're preserving the entry where we can be looking to other parts of the building that could be preserved and some way adopted into the new building?
100%. In fact, the sculptures that you're speaking of to the south that were being exposed so much to the weather, we have moved to the warehouse because of our concern of them being weathered and falling apart, and have entered into some dialogues with some different groups. Someone wants to do some brass, just retain them. So that's a priority to us. So I'm really glad you asked that question, because bringing down the building does not mean taking some portions out and bringing it into the new building. And so that's way high on our radar and a priority.
Okay, thank you.
Very much a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you. Okay, so I had this experience when I was applying for, to go to BYU, and I saw these pictures of like old buildings. It looked so attractive. And I get to BYU, the reality is different. And that was, it just shows you the price of something that is historic, that is old, because it was done with precision and so many things being put into it. The reason I am all for preserving history, the reason I say so, I have come from a village that's been there for hundreds of years, and with time you start seeing the homes being changed into like a modern type of buildings, but then over time you go back and you find that the UNESCO is going back and trying to spend millions of dollars to restore those old buildings. So, and a lot of us here in the United States, we do appreciate old things. We really do. And I personally, you know, just thinking of all the students, all the teachers, builders, animals that walked in that area there or so, and those hundreds of years, you know, that building stood there for so long. And personally, if there is anything that we can do to preserve that history, we owe it, one, to the community. Two, it just actually, our city is becoming so modernized in so many ways, and it'll be nice to have some historic sites maintaining in there. And personally, you know, just the facade or just the entrance, that's, you know, just like, I don't know how to explain it, you know. It's just like a grass that looks beautiful from the outside, but then when you get closer to it, there are so many holes. And personally, you know, if we are preserving something, it's save the site, you know. Let's, you know, take care of that. There is going to be a lot of work, yes. There's going to be a lot of money, absolutely. But guess what? It is going to be worth it in hundreds of years down the road. That's my own thought.
Thank you, Board Member Big. Vice President Williams.
Yeah, let me just get the time going. So one of the things I wanted to say, and I know we're not making a decision tonight, so I am a fourth generation Panther, and so the building itself does mean a lot to me. A lot of my memories are there. A lot of family members have shared their memories there, and it's not even just my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, a lot of extended family as well. And I think most of the board knows this, and maybe some of the community members know, that I served on the West High Alumni Association board for a number of years, 2 years as president prior to coming to this board. And so I do very much resonate with the history, the building, the memories, all of that. And similar to what Mohammed is saying, if there's any way to preserve, I am in favor of that. But we also need to think about the best educational experience for our kids as well, and the thought of them being in portables for, what is it, 7.5?
Yeah.
5 to 7 years, I think is also very damaging. Frankly, from the constituents that I've heard, it's actually very even in favor of option 3 or option 1. And I'm really trying to sort through it and think through this as well. I've heard from some of our teachers, and I'm not going to name them by name for fear of retaliation on them, but they can't even move around in the current building that we have. They can't move from desk to desk. They can't move around to help students. So whatever direction that we go, you know, in a couple of months or even longer, I'd really like to see if there's any way we can kind of do both preservation, but also looking at the needs that those who are working there in the building are sharing with us, and really to make sure that that students aren't stuck in portables for so long. I think about some of the impacts that learning from home with the pandemic had on some of our kids, and the thought of having them in there in portables for that long is kind of scary. But I do just want to reiterate that the history and the memories and just those pieces that are part of what people are reaching out and sharing with me. I just think we need to think really hard, and I do appreciate that we're not rushing through any decision right now. So I'm kind of rambling, but it's a really tough thing to think through.
Thank you, Vice President Williams. Board Member Sweat.
So thank you tonight for the for all of the information that you provided to us, and for the efforts that have been made. I would just like to maybe echo a little bit of what Mohammed and Bryce are saying, You know, I'm a multi-generation person from my high school also. Our high school was an old high school. It was definitely had that architecture that, and it's been tough to watch some things happen to my old high school. But I think what's important that I would hope that we do as a board and the direction that we give is that it really is a conversation that happens within the community. Because I think that as you look at those pieces and parts of memories or history or traditions, all of those things need to be folded in. And I think it's important that as I go back to my old high school, that I see those memories still, that they're a part of that great tradition of that school. So I've seen, at least in the community meetings that I've gone to, really thoughtful, good questions, really good, thoughtful people that are here tonight, you know, that want to be involved. So I would just say as a board, as we go forward, and Nate, I appreciate you saying we're not making any decisions tonight. There's some other things, you know, that we also have to take into consideration. But that I hope that what our message is out to all of you tonight is that this is a concerted effort together. You know, that we'll be talking and figuring out how to gather information as we move forward and land on an option at some point in time, that all of those pieces will be a decision that we make together as a community, not just a school board.
Thank you. Board members. Any other questions or anything else that you'd like to add, Paul? Oh, Lydia. Sorry I missed you.
Hi everyone. Thank you everyone for coming. And thank you for all your work that you did conducting all these feasibility studies. My late grandma and my late great grandpa attended West High School. I skipped a generation. My parents went to East, but I'm a Panther again. And so the history of West High School is not lost on me. I walk through the halls every day in like the same place that my grandparents went to school. But almost every student I've talked to overwhelmingly has supported a rebuild that allows students to have a full high school experience, and forcing or asking students to go to portables for 5 to 7 years, that is an entire high school career done entirely in what's essentially trailers. And I think that's unfair to ask a generation, or not a generation, but 4 to 5 to 7 years of teenagers to do. And so while I think the history is important to preserve and that effect isn't lost on me, I also know from the experience of my students that there are students who are struggling to go to class. There are students who are struggling to learn. And I think especially when we're talking about the effects of the pandemic, that students really deserve to have a classroom building that they feel is a safe learning environment, and an environment that feels like a school, feels like a community, and feels like a home. And I think just in the same way that a lot of people have talked about how seeing changes to their high school have been hard because that school was a home and a community for them, asking students to go to school in portables is not creating a home or a community that they can feel safe in, or look back on their high school experience seeing it as that home or community that a lot of you, I'm so glad, have that experience with your high school.
Thank you, Lydia. Paul, is
So
there anything-
just in conclusion, I really want to emphasize that we are appreciative of all the folks that have come out to meetings and whatnot. However, I also want to emphasize that there's a lot of folks that have provided us with feedback that maybe haven't had the time to come to a meeting or whatnot, and we need to honor the feedback that we've gotten from every stakeholder. And the preferred was a hybrid of feedback from all stakeholders, not from just one group. So I just want to make sure we understand that our work was done by honoring all the stakeholders. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
$300 million.
Hey, Paul.
Thank you very much. Up next on our reports agenda, item number 2 is our proposed fee schedules for 2023-24, presented by Christina Kindle, our Executive Director of Policy and Legal Services.
Thank you.
No need to say anything in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Thank you.
Your terrifying fees.
Pick up, everybody. Turning on the thinking gas again.
Tiffany, you may have to do it for me. Okay. So for our new board members, I just quickly wanted to walk through the statutory requirements for approving a fee schedule. So no later than November of each year, secondary principals, all principals meet with their SECs to review the fees being charged at their individual schools, and determining the appropriate amount of fees or any proposed revisions to the fee amount. They consider 8 factors. New fee requests or changes in the current fees are discussed a minimum of 2 times in SIC and SEC meetings. And for those fees that are not housed at a school but a department level, the department administrators are asked to review their fees for possible revision. So by January 31st of each year, schools and departments schools submit their proposed revisions to the School Leadership and Performance Department, and recommended fees are reviewed by the business administrator Kearsley, myself, and Dr. Taylor. And then the board has to review the fee schedule annually, which typically occurs in February. That's what we're doing now. Then we have to provide 2 opportunities for public comment prior to adopting the fee schedule for the upcoming school year. And those typically occur in February and March. This year, both of those opportunities for public comment will be at the 2 March board meetings that we have. And then the board needs to approve a fee schedule for the upcoming year prior to April 1st. So it will be approved at your second board meeting in March, after you hear from public comment earlier in that board meeting. So you had redlined copies of the fee schedules and the proposed changes to it. One of the things that we are asking for, the main changes, is to increase the maximum annual amount per student from $3,000 to $3,500 a year. We're asking for the addition of boys volleyball to the UHSAA fee schedule. Just as a contingency, boys volleyball is going to come before the board in an upcoming board meeting. It has been approved by UHSAA, so the idea would be if you adopt it, it'll already be on the fee schedule. And if you don't adopt it, I can easily take things off the fee schedule, but I can't add anything to the fee schedule without going through the whole 2 public comment board approval process again. So that's why it's on there as a contingency. And if you look at the UHSAA fee schedules, we no longer have a breakdown between the amounts that are expected to be fundraised for a particular team or sport, and the amount that would be out of pocket. We just list the total amount of the fee per team, and have language that we strongly encourage fundraising, and that fundraising would decrease the out-of-pocket amounts. So those are the 3 major changes, and that's sort of our policy and procedure in a nutshell. So today we're not asking for any action, but I am open to any questions and any recommended changes you would like to see on this, because of course whatever direction you give me is for changes, that's what we would be posting and providing to the public in anticipation of the 2 public comment periods that we're holding at the next board meeting. So just something finalized for the public to see that you would agree with. And as you see, you have 3 separate fee schedules. One is for high schools, one is for the high school athletics, and one is for pre-K, elementary, and middle school fees.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall, and thank you for outlining that we're not making any decisions, but going over our statutory responsibilities as a board and outlining that schedule, I think is really, really helpful for us as a board and for our community moving forward. And I'll open it up for any thoughts or questions. Christy?
I always dread the fee schedule conversation, actually.
I love it.
I know you do, Christina. She doesn't. So first off, I really appreciate the training and the conversations that you have with the schools around the fees. I also appreciate the conversations that happen in the school community councils. I just added up in my head, and I know that you're not going to always spend $1,800, in a specific sport. My boys were triathletes, and so if I had my boys at school right now looking at fees of over $10,000, I don't know if they would pay. I mean, if they would play, because you have to make decisions. And then to look at any of the families that would have to make decisions about that is really tough, because you want to have well-rounded students, and if they have something that they want to be involved in. So it's just amazing to me that this is where we're at, with the amount of money that it takes to run these programs, whether it's a cheer outfit that costs, how much, Jeremy? $1,200?
No,
$3,500?
that's in advance.
And I'm like, that makes me ill, to think about that. And I don't have kids in school anymore. And so it's just something that there's a lot of, I'm grateful that the people who are sitting around the tables that are looking at these fee schedules are the ones who actually have kids in schools. And so I really would love to hear from our parents that sit at this table, about how you feel about some of these fees, because this would be the time for us to give Christina some feedback and then go from there. There's a lot of red, and so, and I know that sometimes it's only like $20, that is the difference, right? And anyway, I just, it gives me a lot of angst.
And I would like to clarify, the reason we're asking for the cap to be raised is specific because the drill team fee itself went over $3,000.
Yeah, which I just want to say, why? I mean, do we need new vendors? Do we need new, I don't know. And I don't know. So that's a lot of money.
Right. They added a competition fee, and then I will say that when the athletic fees were first proposed to Business Administrator Kearsley and I, each line item fee had gone up by 25%. And so Business Administrator Kearsley and I pushed back a little bit on that, and we understand that inflation took place with regard to the uniforms, which is typically in the participation fee, and also the physical set by the vendor increased $5. So we sort of looked at that and food for the team banquets as the three areas where we were comfortable adding in more money. The board had just raised the fees for the overnight travel piece up to $1,200, so we didn't agree to raise those fees anymore. So there is a lot less red than what was initially proposed to us, and we could understand a smaller increase in those three areas, but originally it was a lot bigger. So I think we worked very hard with Missy McKay-Whiters, the district-wide athletic director, to scale back some of these.
So I just want to say that I am a huge proponent of our kids having educational experiences, outside of the classroom, whether it's in athletics or debate or cheer drill. I want our students to have opportunities and access. What I worry about is the burden that it puts on parents for fundraising, but also, we know that we don't want any child to feel like they can't participate. And so it worries me, when I look at the amount of money it's costing for kids to participate now. So anyway, I'll just listen to Mohammed and Jenny and Ashley talk, because that's where it's hard.
Thank you, board members. So and if I could, just one question, Ms. Kindle, that I just remembering in this process over the years, that a lot of these are just caps, right? These are
they're the maximum. You do not have to charge up to the maximum.
Okay.
So this is the most that could potentially be charged.
Right.
And I would, indicate that, for the travel piece, it is the total travel that team can take. It is not per trip. So I know that question was brought up, but that is one of the things we're very clear about.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Questions? Board Member Beatty.
Thank you. As a father of high schoolers, looking at this, it is a bit dreadful to see the prices increase. I don't know where to even start. I received quite a bit of calls from families after last increase we did, and one of the families they said that they had to skip some of they had to change how many medication they have to take so that they can help afford, to send their kids to these programs. And I was like, but there is a waiver. And they said, there is no way in hell I'm going to put in my name or my kid's name for a waiver. Why? Because they don't want their kids to be embarrassed in front of other kids, because the words are going to get out eventually that this kid cannot afford and he got a waiver. So that is the issue that we are running to, especially, at this time where like groceries are increasing, gas is increasing, taxes, house taxes, everything you can think about. Families are hurting. Really, families are hurting. And yes, it may seem like it's $5, $10, $20 here and there, but when you go to a gas station and your tank is going to cost you $65 to $70, that $5 in there makes a big difference in someone's life. There are families out there, especially those who work hourly wages. They're making $15 an hour. Their rent has increased. Their cost of living has increased. Their wages did not increase well. And how can we sit and feel it is all right that we just keep passing the buck to the families here to pay? So personally, I wish if I were to have something that's ideal for the sake of every parent that we have in our district, and a district that is minority majority, if we could freeze what we have for 2 years, give a break to families, and then we pick it up once people are adjusted, once the salaries have caught up, once the wages have caught up. There are just so many things. And I know for sure that we can find a way that we can make up for that difference. That's my...
Thank you. Are there any thoughts or questions? Seeing none, Superintendent.
It just looks like Jenny's going to say something.
I'm just,
Thank you, Ad. Good job.
I'm from a family who fills out the waiver. I played basketball in high school, and I don't ever remember getting charged anything. And I'm thinking, okay, I had to fill out the waiver. And my kids play sports, and to this day, I didn't know until it came graduation that they had all these fees. Hey, you have to pay this graduation fee, or else she's not going to walk, or whatever. And I was like, whoa, where's that from? However, I'm also a parent who's an advocate of sports, and I know how much it costs for kids to play in these sports. And even with a low-income parent as myself and from the community that I'm from, they make it. They strive and they figure out a way because they know it's an investment in their children. I understand, if there's a way, I'll be all for it. But I understand the amount, the inflation, the cost that it will cause, that it will require from these kids. But like I said, majority of the time, I don't reckon or recall ever needing to, any of these fees because we were, granted this fee waiver. But what does that say for the opposite? For a community like Dr. Bates or like Christy Sweat, I could feel, but they're in the same boat too. It's an investment. So I understand the increase, and I understand, all of it that goes into play. But, if there's an option that we could, explore or entertain to, visit, possibly to answer these solutions, I don't know. We don't know a lot of answers. That's why we're sitting on the board. But I'm okay with it, Christy. I'm Christina. I understand it.
Oh, I understand that. I do want to say that I thought I'm just personally dismayed to hear what you're saying about people sort of hearing who's on fee waivers and anyone being embarrassed or shamed about that. The district over the past several years has made great strides to ensure that that information is kept extremely confidential. We've taken all other students out of that process. We've gotten rid of fee waiver lines, any sort of indication as to that parents would not be in any way indicated, like office hours for fee waivers are at this time. So if you saw someone walking in, we've removed a lot of that so there wouldn't be any stigma. So and that information should not be shared. So I am, it's troubling to me because I'm over this policy that's what families would be feeling, and that it would prevent them from filling out that paperwork. I would like to say, I think you and I have had this conversation before, that administrators or coaches can help families fill out that paperwork if it's easier for them to do it that way. But we don't even keep the paperwork on file. We have to destroy it. Like, that information should not be shared, and there shouldn't be any way anybody knows who's on a fee waiver. I'm sure, you know, if there's that perception out there, I can't change that, but I want you to know that as a district and administration, we are doing everything we can so that there isn't that stigma, that no one's humiliated, that no one's pointed out, and that information is not out there. But I understand the perception.
Yeah, so I appreciate your response there. You know, it's easy for us to sit down here and say, yes, it is, you know, we got all the guardrails and everything, but the reality is different when you are the parent who is dealing with that.
Well, and I
You know, the kids, because the kids, you know, maybe you have everything, you know, everything is taken care of, you know, in terms of confidentiality, no one is going to know. But the reality is, kids do talk, and that, it doesn't matter what kind of guardrails we put around, is going to prevent that. So
I have one question, which is about the role of the foundation in supporting students, knowing that fee waivers exist, and knowing that the role of the foundation is supporting students in many ways that their families may not be able to financially. What about, does the foundation have anything to do with extracurricular activities or students in a liminal space where I don't qualify for a fee waiver, but I may not be able to afford something with a higher cap?
So Mr. Yapias has stepped up on multiple occasions to assist teams and individual families. You know, if their fundraiser didn't come up with enough money for the team to go on a trip, he has in multiple instances covered that gap so that the team could still participate, and he does work with individual families in need. So he and the foundation have definitely stepped in on occasion.
Thank you.
Superintendent, anything you want to add?
Can you hear me steaming over here?
A little bit.
I'm sorry. We have public education to provide educational opportunities for kids who couldn't afford to have them otherwise. So it just drives me buggy. That's a technical term. When we then, in our public schools, price the very kids that we have public schools for out of being able to participate in everything that we offer in the public school. That just drives me nuts. And Christina and I have had this conversation. And Alan and Dr. Taylor, we looked at these recommendations. I promise you, the staff here did not sit down and say, oh, let's raise it 25. These are requests that came to us from the schools. Now, I value that, and Jeremy's been nodding, and now he's going, oh dear, what's he going to say next? And what I'm going to say next is I worry about the expectations that our schools feel pressure to meet on behalf of certain students, and we hear and we gotta, if we don't do this, we're going to lose kids to Skyline, except that they're in a relocatable village, so maybe they're coming back. So this plays back and forth. So, but there's
not steam there.
No, there's just I'm trying to keep it together. But we sponsor activities in our schools that are outrageously expensive, and there's two ways to pay for those. We can pay for that as a district, or the parents can pay for those. There is a third alternative, and that's that we not sponsor that expensive of activities. The downside of that is then we may or may not be able to compete with schools and with districts that have different demographics than ours do. And this is a policy decision that the board needs to make. Are we going to continue to sponsor activities at this level of expense? That's question number one. Question number two, are we going question number two is who's going to bear the cost? If yes to one, who's going to bear the cost? Are we going to pick that up as a district, meaning the taxpayers? Or are we going to pass that on in years past, there are some legislators who would sometimes say, let's limit the number of exemptions per family on the taxes, and people would say, well, that would be taxing families with more kids. We're taxing families with more kids. We call it fees. That's already being done. So if yes to one, if we're going to allow travel and these experiences and have that be part of the public school experience, if we're going to have that be part of the public school experience, then who's going to pay for that? Is that going to be, are we going to spread that cost across all of the taxpayers, or are we going to put that onto the families? The fee waiver, there are families that are eligible for fee waivers. There are families that don't worry about the cost at all. And there's an awful lot of families in the middle. Probably the vast majority of families are in the middle. And my steam's, the pressure thing's gone back down. That's all I have to say on this point.
Thank you, Superintendent. And thank you to everybody on the board, too, for...
That's a decision. We're not going to be able to make that decision.
Not doing that tonight. Definitely not.
Board President, may I ask just a timeline question? So could you go back to when we have to have our board hearings?
So we have to have them both in March.
Both in March.
Because you have to approve the fee schedule prior to April 1st.
That's right.
So how do we notify our community of that? Outside of just us noticing on our agenda?
We have to send it out through School Messenger, and it's put on our website. We push it out through all the ways, on all the social media to families through their preferred method of communication and all the different languages. The statute requires us to do that. So it's not just on the board agenda, and that the board agenda goes out.
Thank you.
Sure, of course.
We can also have you go through the phone calls.
Yeah, we do.
I love how our phone system, you cancel it, guess what, it calls you again. Very persistent. I love that.
Thank you so much. Well, I think we have really good direction, Ms. Kindle,
I do?
about our March
Yeah, come
timeline.
back in 2 weeks.
Come
That's
back.
your direction.
Okay.
And just thank you to the board for bringing all of these topics and issues to the surface about what we're doing, and everybody articulated it really well. And thank you, Martin, for identifying that there's a huge gap of folks that are in the middle that we need to also be thinking about. So thank you, everybody, for that discussion. Moving on, we don't have any items on the action agenda. Superintendent, do you have a report to give to the board tonight?
Yes, please, or thank you. I've been in this building since 7:55 this morning. I do not know what the weather looks like outside.
No, what's it like? Is it
bad.
sticking?
Has-
It's a heavy snow.
It has started to snow now?
Go.
Okay, so tomorrow morning, about 3 or 4
In the morning?
in the morning, Paul's going to start getting reports from folks on what it looks like, because we'll have people out there.
We'll start about 12 to 1 o'clock, and I don't mean to hijack the meeting, but everybody, kudos to the grounds crew.
Oh, my gosh.
We've had more snow removal this year than probably the last 20 years. Kudos to our trucks and plows, because every night,
So about 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, Paul's going to call around and we'll probably text around, and we'll see where the snow is then. And we'll decide, really there's 3 options. School is normal, late start, or digital day. And the challenge that we're not sure about this storm is it's all well and good when it all hits and dumps and at 8 o'clock, and then we do a late start for a couple of hours and everything gets cleared off, and then we're good to go at 10. this storm looks like it might continue on until about 4 tomorrow afternoon. If that's the case, then digital day is going to be the option. If it stops and can be cleared, and we're good to go at 8, then we've got a regular day. If we're good to go at 10, then we'll have a late start. If it's not going to be good to go, then we'll have a digital day, and that decision will be made about 5 o'clock. We'll send that out to the world the way that we usually do. That's my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any board member reports? Vice President Williams.
Just be super quick. I just wanted to give kudos to the staff at Rose Park Elementary. They had their Love of Reading Night on Thursday. I got to read one of my favorite children's books to the community there, and just want to give them kudos for that.
Thing that Ensign had Write Your Heart Out, which and a lot of schools are having their literacy events, and let's all go home now and not suffer in the snow.
Right.
I just wanted to report that East High, I was at their community council, and they are working on a cell phone policy. And I think that's really wonderful, because this is something that, as we're looking at legislation, we're trying to suggest that this is a local issue. And I think it's wonderful that we have high schools that are saying, we're tackling this, and it's hard. So I appreciate what they're doing.
Christy, Mohammed, or Jen? Mohammed?
I had an honor of meeting Reverend Jesse Jackson, an amazing man, especially during this month. And I encourage each one of us to, continue to push on teaching our kids about the history. There is nothing wrong with learning about who we are and where we came from. We owe it to our kids. And if that does not happen, I'm going to go ahead and open a nonprofit library where I can have every book, and no one can take them away.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you.
I just have something really quick, just board members. You have in your folders the board member committee assignments and the graduation speaking assignments. Thank you, Board Member Jensen, for your accommodation relative to East High. We really appreciate that, and I know Mohammed does too. Also, we have agenda setting on Tuesday. Mohammed, we penciled you in while you were in Morocco.
Fantastic.
So Tuesday morning at 10. Or 9, excuse me. Tuesday morning at 9, if you could join us here at the district office for agenda setting as per our policies, and we just appreciate everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. Get home safely.
Yeah.
Get it.
Sorry for my rant.
No, I appreciate that.
Are you going to take those, Christy?
I've got mine. Yeah, those are extras.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
those
just
are
didn't want you to get home and go,
Nope.
what do I do with it? That's something I would say.
Oh, you and me both. All right, let's hit the road.
Yeah.